Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, honorables, NABA members, all protocol observed. A very good morning to you all. My name is Eivind Fjeldstad, and I am the CEO of the Norwegian-African Business Association. Let me begin by showing our appreciation to our co-hosts, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Scatec, the Africa Finance Corporation, as well as our partners, Nordic-Africa, Nurmara, and the Financial Times. Thank you all for making this virtual summit possible. We would have wanted to be in the same room. At least we are sitting under the same digital sky. The positive news is that we have never been as many guests, and from a record number of attending countries being with us here this morning. Our ambition today is to reconnect, re-engage, and recalibrate. We may, at the moment, be discouraged from visiting each other, but that should not prevent us from, through other means, establish new connections, learn about opportunities, sectors, topics, and trends shaping business on the continent, and thus recalibrate our business strategy. Yes, networking is harder these days, but please try our virtual cafe in the breaks between sessions. Ask the NABA team for help to be introduced, and many of you have done so already, and you can expect some introductions coming in your inbox over the next days. Our hope is that this community here today will continue to create positive waves also in the weeks and months to come, so stay tuned. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Norway's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Eriksen Søreide, before we will continue with today's first out of 17 conversations. Madam Foreign Minister, thank you for being with us, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Eivind. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be part of this first ever Nordic-African business webcast. For all of those of us who have been to the business summits, we know that it is a very interesting place to be and to meet new people. Now we just have to do it digitally, as with almost everything else, and I'm confident that we will manage this time too. I would also like to thank Eivind Fjeldstad, CEO, and for again, not only hosting us, but bringing us together in this virtual format. The main topic for this year is, as Eivind portrayed, reconnect, re-engage, and recalibrate. Last year, when we met at NABA, we were giving certain predictions for the future. We discussed the need to create some 20 million additional jobs in Africa every year. We discussed the worrying trends that such an escalating trade tensions and also a slowing global economy. But little did we know when we met last year that the worldwide pandemic would be the most worrying trend of all. Not least because I think that the pandemic has shown that it increases and multiplies many of the worrying trends that we already saw. We still don't know the long-term impact of COVID-19 and what it will be on the African continent and its people. But we do know that the pandemic is taking a lot of lives. We do know that both small and medium enterprises are challenged hard because of the lockdown in many countries. And we know that governments as well also have to balance their sheets, and it's a difficult task right now. We know for a fact that the pandemic threatens many of the steps that has been taken forward on the African continent over the past years. The African Union is predicting that some 20 million jobs will be lost, which is then the opposite that we discussed last year, the need to create 20 million new jobs. The pandemic has also caused a major disruption to trade and to value chains. The fallout can be solved by any one country alone, and I think we will see during today. All this means that security is even more important now than before the crisis. It is urgent that we invest in and that we continue to invest in and secure jobs. And how can we be able to sustain people's livelihoods? That's the biggest question, I think, for all, and how to make sure that we continue to generate tax income and to make people able to sustain their families. From Norway's side, we will continue to promote lasting development, growth, and private sector development. None of you will be surprised when I say that Norfund is one of our key tools in that regard. Norfund has shown that there are good opportunities to be found in developing markets that many consider too risky. Norfund's investments have helped to create jobs, to generate tax revenue, to produce power from renewable sources, and to make credit available even for small and micro enterprises. There is currently more trade, and this is an interesting part that we've been discussing a lot over the previous years in NABA. There is now more trade between countries on the African continent than we have seen before. And this is very positive. And even though the final negotiations of the African Continental Free Trade Area is not yet finalized, and of course delayed due to COVID-19, there is reason to be optimistic that there will be a positive result. A recent World Bank study estimates that the African Continental Free Trade Area can contribute to an additional 30 million people working their way out of poverty, extreme poverty, and an additional 68 million working their way from moderate poverty in the next 15 years. Our expectation is that the agreement, once it is implemented, will contribute to streamlining trade rules, increased predictability, and consistent regulation, all of which are key aspects of increased trade and investment. Another key sector that needs more investment is the energy sector. Without energy, there is no development. And in order to overcome the crisis, we must build back better and build back greener and bluer. Investments in renewable energy will be key in this regard. Renewable energy doesn't only create energy, it also creates numerous and diverse jobs. Last year, jobs in the sector worldwide reached an estimated 11.5 million, continuing a long-term growth trend that I think will continue in the years to come as well. It is also quite encouraging that women hold 32% of these jobs, which is far more than in the fossil fuel sector. Norway has experience using hydropower to build up industries. We also have a history of using hydropower for innovation, and we are more than happy to share the experiences that we have. The private sector faces unprecedented uncertainty due to the pandemic. And when we try to look a little bit beyond the pandemic, there is still great potential for more business-to-business cooperation between African and European companies. No single nation can build back their economies alone. And we need to solve this global crisis together as a global community. And we need to work together on everything from vaccines to strengthening our global health architecture. We need more partnerships between businesses and between our political leaders. And we need a better and closer cooperation across countries and across continents. I hope all of you and all of us will benefit from today's webcast. And I hope that it will help us in reconnecting and re-engaging by forging some new partnerships, having a lot of good discussions and ideas, and intensifying both new and existing opportunities. And I wish all of you an inspiring conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Foreign Minister, for those great reflections. Now we are ready for the first conversation here today, and I'm really happy that you have from Addis Ababa, from the African Union, the Commissioner for Energy and Infrastructure, Dr. Amani Abou-Zeid. We have from here in Oslo, the CEO of Scatec Solar, Mr. Raymond Carlsen, and with us from London, the CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation, Samaila Zubairu. So please, let me start by you, Madam Commissioner. How can we take the Nordic-Africa partnership to the next level? What would be the priorities in this partnership from your side?
First of all, thank you very much, Eivind and NABA, for inviting me to this platform. And I would like to acknowledge Her Excellency Minister Søreide, and also the distinguished participants, CEO and the African Finance Corporation, and also all the participants, in this very important meeting. I think we already started strengthening the partnership by the very holding of this meeting online, and and as a continuation to what was, and to build on what NABA did over the last years. This in itself also a way of strengthening partnership. As mentioned in your introduction, and also as very well said by Her Excellency the Minister, we are in a different context. The whole world is in a different context, and true, in Africa, maybe we have not seen the infection numbers or the numbers of deaths as in some regions of the world. That said, the toll, the cost in terms of livelihoods in Africa of COVID-19 is huge. And it's for the first time we see a slowdown or even a contraction of African economies for decades. Africa, as you know, has been recording, record growth globally, and in a sustained way as well. So this comes really as a big hit to all the developmental efforts that we have been carrying out over the last decades. The partnership, and this is so big and huge for all of us, that tighter partnerships and closer working relations are needed now more than ever, both for Africa but also globally. And when we come to the Nordic-Africa partnership, the idea has always been, and the principle we've been working on together, is to build on our comparative advantages and to respond to the priorities and the needs as they occur. Given the landscape that we are having now, given the reprioritization process that is taking place to be having resilience on the continent, but also to recover better. So there are specific sectors that are being prioritized for Africa and or to be scaled up in Africa. One, and the first one, is digitalization. And when I say digitalization, I'm not saying only about, pushing the fibers or the connectivity. No, digitalization in each and every sector. E-learning is a must, because this is what's happening now. E-health is a must. E-commerce, e-governance, or government services, mobile banking, or electronic financial transactions. So everything digital is a priority. It was before, yes, of course. Our continent has been in many ways even leapfrogging when it comes to digitalization in certain sectors. But now more than ever, we need to take this far more in order, one, to equip ourselves to be more resilient, but also it is a fantastic opportunity for the continent to leapfrog, and we should use this opportunity to leapfrog. With digitalization comes energy, as you mentioned, and energy again has been. We have 600 million people on the continent who do not have access to electricity, and we have 870 million Africans who do not have access to clean energy for cooking. And that is, of course, unacceptable at any level. So when it comes to electrification, renewable energy offers us, fantastic opportunities, again, because the technologies are more available, they are cheaper. We have, the digitalization that helps also with different solutions when it comes to energy, renewable energy. We have large programs for mini hydro, for instance. You mentioned hydro on the continent. We are using geothermal in some parts of the continent. We are using wind. We have 2 largest solar power plants in the world, also housed and homed in Africa. So there's a huge potential. And the second, for clean cooking, definitely gas. And gas is the cleanest of fossil fuel, and we are determined to use it also for clean cooking. The third is upskilling, of course. We are keen to create jobs, but not the jobs of the past. And when I say the past, not the jobs of 6 months ago. These are probably, you know, evolved and many of them are going to disappear. So we want to make sure that to equip ourselves to a new reality that is coming very soon, and it is at our doorstep as we speak.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for this first great priorities. And let me just pick up on what you said about energy, and let me bring in the CEO of Scatec Solar, Raymond Carlsen here. You have become the leading solar power producer on the African continent, and you're still eager to accelerate more production. But what can be the catalyst Norwegian investments, and how can the government play a part, seen from your perspective?
I think it's important to think of what the African continent, if I may say that, at least some of the countries in Africa have done right. I mean, we entered South Africa back in 2010, and we looked at South Africa, and we saw a country that had made an energy plan, a country that was looking at how to finance the investments, how to prepare, you know, for an inflow of private capital. And we also saw a country that behaved in a predictable manner. Now, everybody looked at South Africa and wondered, you know, how did they do that? You know, and maybe it's something that we can copy. And yes, we have seen Egypt do the same, Tunisia, Morocco, and a lot of different countries. Now, could this have been done quicker? Could we learn from the past, even that this has been a tremendous success? Yes, we can. Because I believe that things are going too slow. Although, you know, we over the past 10 years have become very successful and been the biggest operator of solar plants in Africa, we could have been twice as big, and there could be a lot of other successful companies. Now, how do you build a solar plant? Well, it's not only construction, creating jobs, it's also you have to have access to funds. You know, there is an investment. This is like if you want to buy a house, you know, you may have, you know, 10-15% of the capital cost, but you need to go to the bank now, and you have to have some income. You know, if you use that example to Africa, it's I mean, private money is there, but you need to look at how to guarantee the income side. You know, how to guarantee how the electricity produced can be paid for. Now, for Africa, there is a lot of grants available. You know, a grant is good. But then again, if you look at the grant and change that into something that you can call a guarantee to get paid for the electricity, you can actually release 10 times the amount from banks, private banks, you know, development banks, and the private industry. And you can accelerate, you know, the deployment of renewable energy to big plants, to small plants that can actually support, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs said, you know, the rapid increase of creation of new jobs, because without electricity, you know, creation of new jobs is going to lag. So, and these instruments, I believe, are available today. And we know if you can include the private industry, companies like ours and a lot of other different private companies, this will accelerate, and you can keep up with the growth. You can accelerate the growth. And of course, with all the other benefits that you all have been talking about. So I'm extremely optimistic about the future, and I know that the Norwegian government is also looking at the how to deploy guarantees and what institutions to cooperate with. But of course, we are eager to get moving, as we always are. So I mean, I welcome the initiatives, and let's get moving.
Thank you, Raymond. Madam Foreign Minister, I want to just jump quickly back to you here, because this has been a demanding year where we have been looking more inwards. Now we need to look out again. And what are the three most important areas where your ministry can contribute, inspire, and help increase business focus on African markets? And not least, how can we become as good or better than our Nordic neighbors?
Because it is always a little bit of a competition between the Nordic countries. Well, first and foremost, I think that seen from our perspective, the the collaboration that we have with you and with NABA is really one of the most, I think, important catalysts for this. And we would like to continue supporting the good work that you do. And we have seen very good partnerships grow out of the connection that we have. Secondly, I think that we need to take the long-term perspective and realize that there is actually no quick fix to this. There has been some impressive developments over the past years, and then suddenly and abruptly the pandemic hit, and it was a difficult situation, and is a difficult situation for everyone. But we have to build on some of the very good progress that was made before the pandemic hit, and I mentioned one of them, the Continental Free Trade Agreement, as one very important part of this, and the fact that investments in renewable energy is actually now has a potential also for increasing. But it will not happen overnight. We just have to take a little bit of time and forge these solid partnerships. And thirdly, this is not something that is only applicable for this cooperation, but our very strong work on multilateralism and the multilateral institutions is actually very important in this regard. If we don't have, for instance, a joint trading system where right is put before might, then not only Norway, but also several African countries and other countries will have a dire situation. So to work with these issues is important to us. But we also have a series of, I would say, bilateral instruments. I mentioned Norfund in my intervention. I think that what Raymond Carlsen mentioned about the beginning in South Africa and how they behaved in a predictable manner, as I wrote down, he said, it is actually an extremely important part of the willingness of Norwegian companies to enter into markets who are more risky than markets they know well from before, to know that there is a conducive environment for doing business, for investments. An independent judiciary is always very important, and all of this combined makes it easier for us to employ also our bilateral instruments in a good way. And I couldn't agree more than this also with Dr. Amani Abou-Zeid on the digitalization issue. I mean, you mentioned a range of areas where digital instruments is going to take us forward, and we just released a white paper to Parliament on digitalization in our foreign and development policies, and I think that we also there have a lot of instruments that we can use to the benefit of this kind of collaboration.
Thank you, Madam Foreign Minister. I will just quickly say that the Foreign Minister, you have an appointment with His Majesty the King now in a few minutes, so you will leave us in 3 minutes. I just want to make sure that everyone doesn't think that your connection has come bad. But I want to bring in now the CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation, Mrs. Samaila Zubairu, because you are one of the leading African finance institutions, and you are currently working with the AP Møller Capital of Denmark, as well as the Acre Group of Norway. And I want to ask you, based on your experience so far, why is the Nordic and Africa a good fit?
Thank you very much, Eivind, and good morning to Honorable Minister Ine Eriksen and Her Excellency Dr. Amani and Raymond Carlsen. Thank you all for being on the panel, and thank you for having us. Before I go into that question, I want to quickly respond to some of the comments that have been raised. At AFC, we clearly resonate with the objectives of raising and creating jobs in Africa. It's something that we think we need to focus on, and something that, interestingly, would lead to the energy utilization that Raymond Carlsen mentioned. So the reason why we don't have much energy utilization on the continent is because we don't have industries. Without industries, there will be no consumption of energy. And without the consumption of energy, energy is not sustainable. So it is very important that we focus on value addition on the continent that utilizes energy resources. These energy resources will create jobs that we're talking about. So they all go together. And we think that this COVID-19 pandemic provides an opportunity for us to change the way we trade with the world, so that we can do more value accretive beneficiation of the resources on the continent. I'll give you an example. If you take cocoa, for example, where we have Africa produces over 70% of the global production, and the value chain for cocoa is estimated to be about $100 billion. But Africa's capture of that value is less than 6%. So that means all of the jobs that will have been created from beneficiating and utilizing the cocoa, even for trade within Africa. You mentioned the Continental Free Trade Agreement, has been lost. So it is important that going forward now, we look at how to make the investments that utilize these resources in a way that we create more energy intensity on the continent and we create more jobs on the continent. Now, clearly, Africa is a continent in a hurry. We have several challenges which you've all mentioned. The Honorable Minister in her opening remarks mentioned, how the lack of infrastructure reduces GDP growth by up to 40%. She also mentioned how the COVID-19 pandemic is going to lead to a loss of jobs. Almost the same amount of jobs that we hope to create will be lost. So we are clearly in a hurry in Africa, and we are looking for pragmatic solutions on how to move the continent forward. So one of the beauties of working with the Nordic firms, by the way, my first encounter with the Nordics was when I was the treasurer for Dangote Group. The finance director at that time was Norwegian, and we had a very good working relationship because I was always in a hurry to get things done, and he was even more in a hurry to get things done. So what the Nordics bring is really, they're quite pragmatic. They go straight to the issues, and they're quite, I would say, they're very pragmatic. They focus on what are the solutions and how do we get things done. So working with Aker Energy, that is the experience that we have. Working with AP Mola Capital is also the same experience that we have. We're always trying to see what do we do to move things forward, and how do we confront reality, because in Africa, you have to confront reality. You have to look at Africa as it is and understand that, the perception of risk is not as high as people always paint it to be. And there's evidence of that. So for example, Moody's has done a study that shows that the project finance default rate in Africa is actually lower than that of Eastern Europe, lower than that of Oceania, lower than that of North America, lower than that of Latin America as well. It is only higher than the Middle East and Western Europe. So clearly, risk is not as high as people see it. Now, the Nordics are good at really understanding the risk as it is, and trying to work within the situation as it is. Another reason why we like working with Nordics is that they are very conscious of sustainability. It is a very important part of how they operate. And we also need to focus on that in Africa. As you know, sustainability in Africa goes beyond just green, because we have several sustainable development goals that we have to look at. For example, we have extreme poverty on the continent, that we need to take care of. And even though we are the least contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and carbon dioxide emissions, we are the most severely hit by it. We have more droughts here, we have more floods here, and they're increasing in intensity and frequency. So it is important that we build resilient infrastructure. So the Nordics are focused on sustainability, and so we find them good partners to work with for sustainable development. And they also understand that sustainability is just not about renewable energy. It is an all-encompassing framework that focuses on lives and development impact for people, how to reduce poverty.
Thank you so much for those reflections, Samaila. I want to continue on the topic of energy, because that is really a unifying factor here. And I want to go back to you, Madam Commissioner, because in one of the sessions following this one, we will look at why it takes so long to get energy projects off the ground. At the same time, as you also rightly pointed out, they are in huge demand. And my question is then, what can the African Union do to help facilitate a faster process?
Thank you, Eivind. I mean, what can we do? What are we doing to facilitate the process? Now, I did mention that there is a big gap when it comes to accessibility, universal access to energy on the continent, and this gap is translated when it comes to financial capital needed, about $60 to $90 billion a year. So definitely, this is an industry that is capital intensive. So we do understand that if you talk about large projects or regional projects. So we do understand that, and they are capital intensive at a time where still the continent for some reasons labeled as risky. And I very much like my brother Samaila intervention, because I think he hit the nail on the head. But we have to eliminate this myth, I mean, about how risky Africa is, and no one would like to see or likes to see things as they are in reality. And if you look at the numbers, the mere numbers, we are not the riskiest or even close to a riskiest region in the world. So this is one. Two, we also are at the African Union, we have programs for regional projects that we do assess them for preparedness. We have a facility to also do the preliminary studies so as to help the investors and carry some of the burden, because these are costly studies when it comes to technical matters. We are creating ways to harmonize the regulations to make them more appealing and to make the technical and both the regulatory framework easier for larger investors in our regional programs, with the aim of having a market, an African market for energy as well. We are, as I did mention, we have programs for mini hydro. We have programs for geothermal energy, which is a fantastic source of energy for East Africa for the private sector, in which we also fund by ways of grant many of the preliminary works needed for these programs. So there's a series really of interventions from the small to the big, public and private, that we are doing together, of course, with the other, our economic arm at in Africa, the African Development Bank, and of course the African Finance Corporation, to make sure to, on the one hand, give confidence to the investors, but also ensure that these projects are bankable, that they are, credible, and they attract investors. But again, this goes hand in hand with the fact that we also have to work together to eliminate some of the stereotypes that are no longer, for the majority of them, no longer valid. The second point, again, we are pushing for unconventional solutions, now more than ever. So there's another program for mini and off-grid solutions. Remember, those remote areas or rural areas, the technology, again, the technology is giving us different solutions, the digital technology, and they are less costly. They are very suitable for small and medium enterprises. They turn, the consumer also into a producer of energy that they can sell and buy within the same village, say, or region. So there are unconventional solutions, and they are fantastic ones carried out by Africans, and we want to make sure that these are taken to scale across the continent. On mini-grid and off-grid solutions are also big ticket for the future in order to electrify the rural and remote areas.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Madam Commissioner. Now, let me go back to you, Raymond, because our guests, they were shown a film as we were just starting up, underlining what we said about you now becoming, being the leading solar power producer on the continent. But what are some of the lessons learned? What have been important to your success in African markets? Can you mention some of those highlights that we can learn from?
I think it's important to be patient. And patience isn't only sitting around, waiting for something to happen. Patience is actually interfacing with the people that are making decisions, understanding what it takes to be successful. I can give an example. We have been pursuing a 40 megawatt project in Mali, I mean, 40 megawatt in 2011 was huge. Now, due to the 80% reduction in cost, it's a small project, but that has not yet been realized. And there are some reasons why, because of course Mali has had a few challenges up through the years, the past decade. It's also the way that the international community, and I'm not complaining about the World Bank because they do a great job, but they have a different agenda. It's also about the finance institutions that want to make things completely watertight in everything they do, and that's important for us as a private investor as well. So the processes that we put up is making this go more slow than it should. We have a product called Release. That's a containerized solar plant with batteries. It doesn't need a 20-year power purchase agreement. It doesn't need sovereign guarantees. What it needs is to have a contract in place that private investors believe are going to be fulfilled. Now, how can that be done? How can you resolve that? You can do that by actually approaching this with a different financing instrument, providing security to the payments for the electricity. And as what's correctly said there, power purchase agreements in Africa have a default rate of 3.5%, which is close to zero. And it's much higher elsewhere. So there is confidence already, by an investor community that, yeah, you should look at Africa with very, very positive, eyes. And back to what I said originally, I think, a lot of the funds that are being provided on a grant purpose should be used as a guarantee facility. This should be managed by professional institutions in Africa, making sure that we can deploy smaller units into villages, into smaller industries, and that kind of thing. And I'll give you one more example. You have 40 gigawatts of diesel-generated power in Africa. Terrible. Well, it's actually not terrible because you need the electricity. It's the only way to get it. It's extremely expensive. It costs between 25 to 30 cents per kilowatt hour. By deploying solar, this release concept that we have, you can drop that cost in half. You can save the environment, and you can do it quickly, and you can transport it into areas where you don't need a grid. You don't need to have heavy machinery transported into central parts of Africa, and it can be done quickly. And if people do not really want to go into a long-term contracts, you go into 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and you can move something else. It's called release, meaning that you can redeploy it somewhere else. This is a concept that we're working with some of the finance institutions on right now, and I believe, cross my finger, it's going to be a tremendous success, and it will, accelerate the deployment of renewable energy into Africa and elsewhere in the world where it's in desperate need of that.
It's a great point, Raymond. And I want to go back now to you, Samaila, because to lift us a bit from the energy, but based on your experience, what are the most usual misconceptions Nordic or foreign investors may have about African markets? I mean, you meet these investors all the time. So, what are the misconceptions that you could ratify now?
Thank you very much for that question, Eivind. Now, we have, I would say, a balanced view of experience with investors, and I'll start with the very positives. So, because we're an investment-grade institution, we have access to financial markets. So we're able to get capital for business on the continent. So in the middle of the pandemic, in June, we're able to issue a Euro bond of $700 million at a coupon of 3.125%, which is very good, because most other African states are getting money at much higher rates. And the fact that we could access the market at that point in time shows that there is still a willingness to do business on the continent, and to do business on the continent at fair terms. We also recently did a green bond about 2 weeks ago, and we also got very good pricing. We did it in the Swiss market. We even got lower pricing than we got in June. So these are all positives, and it shows that people are willing to engage, with the continent if they find credible partners that demonstrate their ability to de-risk projects and to distribute those projects to the relevant institutions. But then we also come back to the point that I raised earlier, which is about the perception of risk on the continent. Another point I wanted to make, apart from us having one of the lowest default rates on the continent, that there's an institution called the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA. So they've been doing business in Africa. They provide political risk insurance and non-payment insurance, and they've never paid a claim in Africa. For all their years of operating on the continent, they've never paid a claim. This is further evidence that the perception of risk in Africa is misplaced, and something needs to be done about it. So for example, they need to reduce their own premiums for doing business in Africa. That way, they are working with the principles of insurance, which says that when there is no claim, the premiums should come down. And if that happens, then we will be able to see the London market and other markets take adjustments from those rates. Raymond mentioned guarantees as part of the tools for de-risking opportunities on the continent. That is a very good point, and we would like to see how we can engage with NABA and other institutions. The Honorable Minister has left, but we'd like to engage with them to see how we can have those guarantee instruments, for de-risking of projects on the continent. So again, it's all about the risk perception, some of which is significantly misplaced, but then we have other investors that understand the risk and are able to take on the risk, and we see that. So talking about what we do at AFC, our major focus in AFC is really to reduce the risk of projects. We try to transform projects from an idea to a bankable opportunity by investing our capital to reduce the risk of the project. And I'll give you an example. So we're working on a wind farm presently in Djibouti. We started with a dialogue with the government. They have needs for over 80 megawatts of power. They have 14 megawatts aging diesel plant, and then they import the rest of the power from Ethiopia. But we worked with them, and we created the project. We signed the first power purchase agreement in the country with them, and then we were able to invite FMO, the Dutch Development Finance Agency, and Climate Investor One to come alongside us, to do the project. Now we achieved financial close, and we've started construction using equity or an equity bridge, which is a construction finance instrument that we've innovated because we're trying to see how we can reduce the time it takes for financial close. So we created that instrument, and we use it to start the construction of the wind farm. Now, construction has started. We hope to commission next year. But this year, we did a green bond, to provide the debt for the project debt for the wind farm. So we've been able to start the project, de-risk it, and because we've de-risked it, we've been able to go to the Eurobond market, to the Swiss bond market, to get the debt that is required for the project. So this shows you that with the right framework of reducing the risk of the project, we can attract capital, and we've been working hard on this. And we'll continue to work hard on this. So Her Excellency Dr. Amani made references to some programs. We would engage with them to see how we can work with them to ensure that these projects are executed, and we can have more energy on the continent, as well as the jobs that I mentioned that we hope to create by doing, I would say, import substitution on the continent. We are looking at how to look at value chains and to make them more flexible, and to make sure that we have more value capture in Africa. We create more jobs in Africa.
That's well said, Samaila, and good example provided there. We are getting to the end of this conversation, but I just want to sneak in one last question to the Commissioner, because one of your flagship projects at the African Union is the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. How will this change the business landscape on the continent? If you can, it's a brief response to that.
Here we're talking about the largest free trade area in the world. So access to Africa is not access to one country out of the 55, but access to a 1.3 billion market population in terms of population. We talked about economies of scale. We talked about regional value chains, an incredible boost to industrialization, to job creation, and very attractive, of course, for the foreign investment. And definitely, this is a great catalyst also for further digitalization, for more infrastructure, especially transport. And this goes hand in hand with also our flagship project for the single African air transport market, our harmonization program of regulations for transport, regulations for energy, regulation for digitalization through the single digital market. So we really trying to create a big market where regulations are harmonized, where the climate, the business climate is much improved to make it a market of scale, highly competitive and highly attractive to investment. And it presents, a fantastic opportunity both for the continent and, of course, for foreign investment.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. I could not have agreed more. And thank you, Raymond and Samaila and the Foreign Minister for being part of this conversation. Now, please go and get your coffee and tea. There is the virtual cafe waiting for you, and we will continue with 4 parallel sessions starting now at 10 o'clock, focusing on agribusiness, strengthening Africa's business climate, the continent's renewable energy revolution that we have also discussed now, and also cybersecurity. Is Africa ready? So again, dear speakers, dear guests, thank you so much for being part of the main stage now, and we look forward to
Thank you, Eivind, and the distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.